As you take a look at Pete Prisco's top 10 list of his top 100 free agents, look at that. Most of those guys are off the board. Pete's in the know. He knows who the guys are that people want. Orlando Brown's still out there, though. James Bradberry and Jordan Poyer are still looking for contracts. So those are the guys that we want to talk about. Let's bring in senior NFL writer Pete Prisco for that. The top free agent left on the board, Orlando Brown. Pete, there were whispers that he could be off to Chicago. What are you hearing?
Well, yeah, there were also whispers that he could go back to Kansas City, and it didn't work out that way. And so I think they opted to go with a younger player, and Jawan Taylor is going to be their starting left tackle, moving from the right side, where they signed to a big deal, by the way, $20 million a year. So where does Orlando Brown end up? Here's the problem with Orlando Brown. A lot of guys around the league think he's better suited to play right tackle. Orlando Brown wants to play left tackle. So I think there's a disconnect there in some form or fashion. I personally think he'd be a starting right tackle, would be a dominant right tackle for a team who does have a left tackle. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. But I think he's overplaying his market value, I think, as a left tackle, which is why this isn't done yet. Ultimately, he'll get signed, and I think he's going to end up being a good quality starter, whether it's on the left or right side. He's just not Trent Williams. He might think he is, but he's not.
Well, and the funny thing is, he's playing left tackle. Most teams see him as a right tackle. The guy that the Chiefs are bringing in is a right tackle that they're converting to a left tackle. So that's maybe gives you some pause there. All right, in terms of the cornerbacks, James Bradberry is the top one left on your list. Who could be in need of his services after what we've seen on day one?
Well, I think the thing with James Bradberry is you're seeing the market kind of flush out a little bit. And when you look at it, I think he's probably asking for big money. Remember, this was a guy who was on a one-year deal last year, and which is why the Eagles got him, landed him, and he was able to be a big part of their defense. So I think the market's probably kind of being kind of determined right now for him. He's probably asking for way too much money, and there's some cornerback needy teams that are going to sit there and wait and see if that price comes down. I mean, if you have money, James Bradberry is a good quality starting corner. Jamal Dean just did his deal to go back to Tampa Bay. Patrick Peterson really essentially did a one-year deal. So I think when you look at Bradberry, where could he end up? I mean, Jacksonville needs a corner in the worst way. They don't have a ton of money, but they need a corner. They could make it work if they wanted to. I also hear Sean Murphy bunting a possibility in Jacksonville as well. So I think Bradberry's market right now is probably a little too high for what people want to pay him. I think it'll come down a little bit, and he'll ultimately get a deal done with somebody.
There's still some safeties left on the board as well. What about the market for a guy like safety Jordan Poyer?
Well, I think when you look at the value of the position, you saw what, Atlanta gave Jesse Bates was, $16 million average per year. And that exceeded everybody else who is signed in terms of the safety position by a ton. So you got to go somewhere from 16 down to probably 7 or 8 or even 6, which some of these deals are averaging. And that's what I think Poyer is going to get. Look, Poyer is, 31 years old, but he still can play at a high level. When he's on the field, he's a heck of a player on the back end. The concern is price. And he has said he'd love to play in Florida. This is a guy that lives in Fort Lauderdale, as a matter of fact. He would love to be able to play maybe for the Miami Dolphins. I think that's a possibility. But I don't think he's going to get a mega deal. He's going to be more in line for like a 3-year deal that averages about $6 million a year. He's not going to get the Jesse Bates deal.
All right, and he's one of guys that's still out there. But, I mean, yeah, we've seen some safeties signed in the last couple of days. Certainly that first 24 hours, as mentioned, of the legal tampering window has been a little wild. One of the stories that came out yesterday was Chargers running back Austin Ekeler asking the team for permission to seek a trade. They, of course, have been working on an extension, but apparently negotiations have not been going well. So Ekeler has asked for permission. The Chargers have granted him permission. Pete, what would a trade for Austin Ekeler look like?
Well, here's the thing about any team that trades for him, and I love him. He's a great player, but he's also going to be 28, which is getting up there in running back years. He's not a big power back. He's a guy that fits in certain systems. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Yes, he's a dynamic playmaker, but he's getting up in the years. Here's the other thing. If you trade assets to get him, then you have to pay him. You're not going to trade to use him for 1 year. You're going to trade to give him a contract extension, which is what he ultimately wants. So what's that deal look like? It's hard to give out a big money deal to a running back. The last time around, he got, 4 years for $24 million. Is he worth 4 years for $24 million again? Probably not. So peg it down a year, maybe give him a 3-year deal for, $17, $18 million. I think he'd be happy with that. Again, though, it's a trade and pay. Those are always risky, particularly when you look at the running back class in the draft. It's loaded. You can get guys in the 4th, 5th round who are going to come in and be contributors. So I think Ekeler's probably looking for a bigger deal than he's going to get. Who's going to give up the picks and pay him? That's always a concern.
And one of those guys, Pete, that's one of those positions. We know your opinion on running backs. Run them, and then get the next guy to come through. Okay.
But he's a little bit different. You know what, Jeremy? He's a little bit different because he does so much catching the ball out of the backfield. He's the airback. He's the prototypical airback. The thing working against him, though, is his age. I mean, could you see him in Buffalo? I mean, James Cook is ready to do more things in that offense, but he could be a factor in an offense like the Buffalo Bills. He could catch the heck of a lot of passes out of the backfield and give them a dimension that they don't have in their passing game.
Well, interesting to see what happens with Ekeler. Again, the Chargers granting him permission to seek a trade out of Los Angeles. All right, Pete, one of the stories that's coming down is just come down, as a matter of fact. Apparently, according to reports, Aaron Rodgers has given the New York Jets a wish list of players that he would like them to go after in free agency. And some of those players include Randall Cobb, wide receiver Alan Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, and Odell Beckham Jr. Now, we're all waiting for this deal to be completed with Rodgers, but the Jets have reportedly started to look at a deal for Lazard and Cobb. I mean, what do you make of this wish list that Rodgers has for the Jets?
I mean, if I'm one of the wide receivers on the New York Jets, I'm not really happy about this, to be honest with you. I'm Garrett Wilson and gang. I'm angry. I mean, you don't even know me. You know your guys. You know Lazard. You know Cobb. What does that tell you about me? And that's my biggest concern if I'm the guys on the roster already. I jokingly sent out a tweet, what's next? You going to ask for Jordy Nelson and Donald Driver too? Can James Lofton still play? I mean, it's ridiculous. Rodgers is absurd when it comes to being so loyal to his guys. At some point, you got to cut the ties with your guys. Look, Randall Cobb isn't Randall Cobb anymore. Mercedes Lewis is a one-dimensional blocking tight end. It's always good to have a blocking tight end. He's one of the best, but he's one-dimensional. And Alan Lazard is a guy who doesn't run, doesn't carry down the field. He's a good receiver, but he's a possession guy. So I think you add it all up. I think Rodgers is being a little selfish here. He's also trying to take care of some of his guys.
Well, and he's been complaining about the fact that Green Bay haven't drafted a good wide receiver in a number of years. The Jets have got 2 good guys there. To your point, Pete, that now he's got a couple of young guys that he can really work with, but now apparently he's going for something else on his wish list. Pete, always appreciate you. Senior NFL writer Pete Prisco joining us to discuss a wild 24 hours as the legal tampering window has opened in free agency, just over 24 hours away. And for more from free agency, insight, opinion, and takes, both sensible and a bit ridiculous, be sure you're listening to the Pick 6 podcast. Download and follow wherever you get your podcast audio.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.